Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with a Coach. Today we have a question from Michael Sexton who says, in response to a video where I talked about my friend Dan, who runs a jiu-jitsu school, and he's awesome and he's a very good coach. He says, at this point in the video, you refer to your friend Dan as a good jiu-jitsu player. I've heard you say that several times in your videos, and it always makes me think of a game like baseball or Monopoly. It seems strange to me to liken a serious and deadly combat sport to a game, and I wonder why you say player as opposed to practitioner, student, or fighter, or whatever. Would you please shed some light on this? Okay. When talking about the sport of IBJJF jiu-jitsu, I do not refer to it as fighting, and I don't refer to the athletes who compete in it as fighters in the context of the sport in which they are doing. I refer to them as players, jiu-jitsu players. Why? Because they're playing a very specific game. Yeah, these guys, if they are fighting you, are perfectly capable of strangling you to death and breaking your arms and your legs and things like that. Especially if you don't know jiu-jitsu. But the sport of IBJJF jiu-jitsu, the reason I don't call it a fight is because it is very much a points game. You can win either by points or by submission. And the rules are such, they are structured so that damage of any kind is minimized. Absolutely minimized. No slamming, no reaping the knee to the point where you are not able to hook your leg around your opponent's leg where your heel passes even a centimeter too far, for fear that it might put some undue stress on the knee. That's not what I would call a fight. Now, that rule set is fine if that is the sport. And if you are going to compete in IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu, there's no sense complaining, oh, I don't like this rule set. If you don't like that rule set, compete in a different organization, in a different sport, under different rules. I'm not a big fan of IBJJF rules myself. How did I say that? IBJJF, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation rules. I don't like them. I don't enjoy them. I find them very restrictive. And because of that, I rarely compete in IBJJF tournaments. I do sometimes because there are so many of them. It is the most popular rule set for jiu-jitsu worldwide. I don't know why it's so popular. Probably because it's the most user-friendly, if you will, because it's the safest. At least it looks the safest on paper. And so that attracts people. People know if they go to an IBJJF tournament, they're not going to get punched in the face, they're not going to get slammed on their heads, they're not going to get their knee reaped or their heel hooked or whatever. They can go there with a certain level of confidence. This is a sport with this very structured, rigid rule set where I can go back to work the next day without a black eye, where I can be just fine, and that's okay. That's fine. I don't enjoy that rule set. A lot of people do. That's okay. I don't like the game of American football. I don't watch it. I don't play it. I know a lot of other people do, and that's fine. I don't have anything against the sport of football. But it's just not something I personally enjoy. So why do I call them players? Why would I call an athlete in any other game, playing any other sport, a player? Because they're a player, playing into a rule set, a very specific rule set. Now, MMA fighters, boxers, kickboxers, these guys, they're also playing into a very specific rule set, sometimes a very rigid rule set, like boxing. You can only punch above the belt to the front of the body with the fists. So why do I call that a fight? Why do I call them fighters? Because they're damaging each other. because you don't go home after that without a black eye, and contusions, and cuts, and lacerations, and damage to your body. You don't go to work the next day without any consequences. That's why I call those arts that involve striking and other related damage a fight, and not IBJJF jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of strategy involved in IBJJF jiu-jitsu, and my friend Dan is an absolute master tactician within that rule set. He is absolutely amazing, and I've learned a lot from him. And from watching his coaching skills, observing his coaching skills within that framework of that sport, I've learned a lot about how to coach other sports. How to coach the sport of mixed martial arts also. Because when you have a lot of limitations, you're forced to ask some very important questions. How do I work within these limitations? How do I work within a very specific rule set to triumph within any rule set, or lack thereof? I have a college degree in modern dance. Yeah, modern dance, contemporary dance. And a lot of what we did in college to pursue this degree was improvisation. People will often ask, what makes modern dance different than other forms of dance like ballet or tap or jazz or whatever, or ballroom? Okay, all those other forms have very specific structures. In classical ballet, you have to move your arms in very specific patterns, or it's not classical ballet. You have to move your legs in very specific patterns, very specific ways and positions, or it's not classical ballet. If you introduce a new movement, it's not classical ballet anymore. You might be able to do that in modern ballet, but not classical. In ballroom dance, there are very specific figures that you have to follow. And if you don't follow them, it's not the cha-cha, it's something else. It's not the waltz, it's something else. It's not the foxtrot, it's something else. But with modern dance, there is no canon of movement. Very similar to how in mixed martial arts there is no canon of movement. As opposed to classical styles like karate, there are very specific movements. And if you do something else, it's not karate. Or if you do something else, it's not kung fu. If you do something else, it's not tai chi. If you do something else, it's not Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Okay? But in mixed martial arts, it's this wide open rule set. There's no canon of movement, if you will. Whatever wins the fight is allowed. Just like in modern dance, which is the MMA of the dance world, if you will, there's no canon of movement. Any movement can potentially be dance. But here's the thing. Just like every movement doesn't win a fight, every movement isn't dance. But it can be. Okay? We need structure. If you take an improvisation class, a dance improvisation class, and your instructor just says, all right, go nuts and do whatever you want, and that's all you ever do every day, for the entire semester, you will learn nothing. You might get a little more comfortable moving around in the ways that you are already comfortable moving around, but ultimately you will learn nothing. But if you are given structure, suddenly we start to learn things. We start to ask important questions. We start to develop in ways we didn't know were possible. And that's why, even though I don't enjoy the sport of IBJJF rules, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I still think it's important that it exists because of the things I've learned from that structure and coaching athletes to compete in that structure. In a modern dance class, if you're going to give somebody structure, you might say, all right, we are going to dance for 1 minute. I will put on a song with this 4/4 tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But here's the structure. You cannot follow the beat. You have to dance arrhythmically. And there has to be a level change every time you lift up one leg. Or something silly like that. And what does that mean? Every time you lift up one leg? Well, what do? Maybe you roll onto your back, and now both legs are raised up, so you don't have to do the level change, but you're on the floor. So what do? I don't know, a handstand or something? And then you go back down to your feet. You're on both feet. What do? You're moving arrhythmically. Boom, 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 boom. But that 4/4 beat is going, but you're trying not to move to the beat. And you're learning something. You're fighting that instinct to move to the beat. Boom, 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 boom. So you're moving arrhythmically, sporadically, differently, with a broken rhythm. And then you lift up one foot to take a step, and then you realize, wait, I've got to change my level. So you duck or you roll or you jump or you go up or down somehow. And suddenly we have created a structured movement with a couple of simple, silly-sounding rules. And you can change the rules, however. If you move onto this side of the stage, you have to do such and such a thing. If you move onto this side of the stage, you have to do something else. Right? And suddenly this unstructured, silly movement turns into something that resembles more of a dance, more of an art. We start to develop recognizable patterns. Just like in fighting, when we start to recognize patterns and move within and around that pattern structure and predict patterns of our opponent, then we can start to win more efficiently. It becomes an art. Not arts and crafts, my friends, not fine arts like dance and music and theater, but martial arts. Art means the ability to do something really well. Martial means of or pertaining to war, combat, fighting. Martial arts is literally being able to fight really well. That's all. The word was first used, I believe, in the 1700s in a sword fighting manual. In a European sword fighting manual. Martial arts at that time, in the English language, referred to sword fighting. And since then, it has been applied to basically all systems of combat with weapons or hand-to-hand. Even though it has kind of this silly context of only traditional, classical, Eastern styles of hand-to-hand combat, many of which have almost entirely divorced themselves from actual combat anyway. It's a long aside here. I kind of forgot what I was talking about originally. So, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the question. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.